quick list of the topics that we're going to cover today. Firewise Community Program, Understanding Wildfire, How Homes Ignite, Hazard Assessment, Firewise Landscaping, and the community itself. So the National Firewise Committee Program is an interagency program designed to encourage local solutions for safety in the wildland urban interface by involving homeowners, community leaders, planners, developers, firefighters, and others in an effort to protect the people and the property from the risk of wildland fire. Let's see, the agencies can't necessarily mandate what we do on our private property, thank God. But what we want, and we want to keep it that way, what we want to do is we want to be proactive and take responsibility for our land and our property. The Firewise Community Program is all about that. The vision of Firewise Communities is with adequate planning, cooperation among varying interests, wildfires, and that can occur without disastrous loss of fire property and resources.
And so that in a nutshell, we've got the communities doing community projects, you've got the State Forest Service doing community projects. I know Glacier View Meadows out of the community has been really proactive in cutting in some of their larger green space areas over the years, but the Firewise program is more tailored to you as a homeowner and then how that kind of works together as us in a community. And so it covers all those details that start specifically 0 to 3 feet from your home out to 200 feet. It's also really nice because the insurance companies, whether you're with State Farm or AmFam or Farmers, are all starting to use the Firewise principles for their defensible space. So it's a lot easier for us to come out and talk to you about the do's and don'ts, and it doesn't matter whether you have one insurance company versus another. And those recommendations are largely being driven by good forestry people, the State Forest Service. So I think coming from a good place and a lot of good information there.
The reality today is that fire agencies cannot solve the problems alone. Firefighters do not have the resources to defend every home during a wildfire. Personal responsibility is the key. Residents can take steps to reduce their risks. We know that using Firewise strategies can increase the likelihood of our homes surviving a wildland fire threat. Research tells us that if we really want to reduce our risk of the wildland threats to our homes, we need to focus right in our own backyards. When you work on your backyard, you're working on and helping your neighbors. So what you mitigate here, you mitigate there.
We love a term we used to use that we learned years and years ago from one of the local fire departments is not to wait until there's smoke in the air. If you think of, and you guys have, I wouldn't say one of the better, you folks have the best rural fire department that we work with really in northern Colorado, as far as engaged and having equipment and just kind of having your act together. But if you think of all the resources in the fire department at Glacier View Meadows versus how many homes there are in a fire event, and these guys are running around like crazy trying to move firewood piles and weed whack and move debris out from under your deck and move your fuel cans. All these things that we can do kind of an annual maintenance basis so that the fire department can just keep on moving to where their resources are best used. And so those are the type of things when we think about maintenance. It's not always a lot of large-scale cutting and pruning and removing of trees so much as it is that annual maintenance. And we just don't want to wait till it's smoky.
So basically the truth about wildfire. Wildfire is an element of nature. Although fire can be destructive, particularly where property and life are concerned, it's important to recognize that the fire performs a vital role in the ecosystem. It's important to understand this because it is the context in which land management agencies make their decisions about fire management. We could spend the entire discussion talking about that and the ecosystem, but since we've got just this, let's talk about some of what the essential process is. It replenishes soil nutrients, removes dead and dying vegetation, creates conditions for healthy growth. So there's some of the positive things of a fire. We just don't want it to end up in our backyard.
All things that you can do on your property in lieu of fire. We like to say when we come out, if you were managing your property, AJ, personally, you would want it to look like you did it by hand over a bunch of years. And when we're out talking to people philosophically about that limbing and pruning and the uneven nature of it, we're trying to mimic that same pattern we get in fire. We can do in your forest to keep it healthy. You can do on your land in lieu of fire having to do that. Yeah, these were some pictures these are actually Northern Colorado pictures that we put in here as well when we talk about conditions for fire. And we've got a couple of different here. The one on the upper right there is a home up in Estes Park, kind of a typical, we came out for an all-state inspection. Actually, it was an inspection that turned into a cancellation notice. And so they have been suggesting things for many, many years. And as I'm sure some of you have found out, if not, you will, those letters have gone from suggestions to cancellation notices. Oftentimes that's just a matter of some weed whacking or brush removal. Other times it's a matter of kind of having to get serious about your defensible space. And so this one over here on the right is we came in, I think we thinned out that clump by about 10% is all, but then did a bunch of pruning off of both the patios and kind of around the home. This is some post High Park fire cleanup on Ward Mountain out on Stowe Prairie Road. This is a home in Estes Park. Again, real dense lodgepole timber there, and trying to work we start with the road. We try to, when we've got a lot of work to do, we try to prioritize that work. We start with our defensible space, access, safety access. We work with our roads and our natural areas to kind of, to put a plan together to thin appropriately. And again, the cutting that we're doing here in the lodgepole forest at more of a patch cut is much different than we're going to do. This is a home here in your neighborhood. Again, all state inspection. We get the call, I don't know what they're talking about. Trees are fine, they're not that close to the house. No problem. And so again, on something like this, we're going to take a bit of a delicate touch with it. We're going to prune the lilacs back. That's actually a lilac shrub. Get the spruce off the roof, limb that up a little bit. Come back out here to the ponderosa, limb that up a little bit. That'll get us out to almost 30 feet from the house. And because they've got some slope and because of their particular insurance company, they want the vegetation managed out between 100 to 200 feet. We are not going to weed whack and mow that area per se, but we will knock the heavy grass down out to 75 feet or so and then get weed whacked under any of the trees out in there. Try to apply a little bit of common sense. That kind of gets worse as you go around the back of the house. But those are some of the things. Again, every home's a little different, but oftentimes it does require a fair bit of cutting.
So basically, a quick little education on something you probably already know. Wildland fire behavior elements, how a fire burns. To understand our wildfire risk, we need to understand a little bit about how wildfires spread, fires affected by fuels, weather, and terrain. Wildland fire behavior elements, the fuels, basically would include trees, grass structures such as fences, homes, even lawn furniture. So be careful what you have out, on your deck.
And this is the one we have control of. This is the one of the fire cycle. That's our sweet spot right there. That's the one we really. We control our ignition to some extent, but we all live with folks who don't respect fire as much as others, and Mother Nature as well. And so that's the one that we can really get our arms around.
The dry grass, shrubs, pine needles, dead branches, etc. Surface fires tend to be relatively low intensity fires. Then we have crown fuel. That's when your trees need to be limbed up.
And so the three different fuels here is they're trying to just demonstrate here in the photos. Crown fuels is where we have too much of the density, but too much touching together, and so fire is moving through those crowns. Those tend to make those really great CNN fires. Those burn a lot, they burn real hot, and they tend to kind of ruin everything in its path. Our ladder fuels are all of our low-lying limbs on our big trees. I think it's real important when we think about ladder fuels, people have a tendency to think they need to prune every tree on their lot, whether it's 1/3 of an acre or 3 acres, to be pruned up to 8 feet. We don't have to do that. I promise you the critters living in your forest do not appreciate that either. But we do need to start right around the home, and we need to remove those ladder fuels. Sometimes that's some branches, sometimes that's trees within that clump that need to come out. There's usually kind of a happy medium there. But as we move out into the forest, we may still prune some ladder fuels off of your big trees if you have horses or the grandkids are out riding ATVs. But lots of times we just want to leave them in a bit of a more natural state. So we don't want to get carried away with the ladder fuels. And the surface fuels are that accumulation of pine needles and duff and pine cones. And when you start digging in them, you find out it's not 3 inches, it's 6 inches or 8 inches. And we really want to get those moved out as well.
Weather's also a huge factor that you have to consider. Humidity, wind, and drought conditions.
Larimer County was on a red flag day. Was it fire department? Was it Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday? This last week. And so we, Fern Lake Fire evacuated homes in Estes Park in January and December in 2014. As you folks know, we're not kind of preaching to the choir here when we talk about fire season in Colorado. All that dry grass is always ripe for fire.
And I know that you probably heard about the Starwood fire that just happened last week. That was lightning strike. And that took out about 300 acres, and we evacuated a part of Mill Creek, and you know, so there's some things that even now you can mitigate on your property. Should something like that happen, it can help if you do that.
And if you think of the Starwood too, I mean, I think most folks would agree that over the last month we've had pretty good moisture. Things have the cooler temperatures. We're starting to get a little bit of rain here and there, but we're still just, again, it's not nearly as wet as it feels like it is. So yeah.
The other thing to consider is terrain. Where's your property sitting? Is it in a slope? Is it in a chimney? Those all are variables that really come into play when you landscape for FIREWISE landscaping.
And so when we talk about low hazard, moderate hazard, and high hazard areas, we're really talking about vegetation and proximity to your home. One of the things that we like to talk about as we work from low hazard to high hazard is, and every home's a little bit different depending on where you're at elevation wise and what your forest type is around. Lots of times we're dealing with tall grasses and weeds more than we are trees. I think one thing we found out after some of these real nasty fires these last few actually was that those tall grasses and weeds and debris that lead right up to the steps at the base of your home that just really create a perfect ignition potential there. Your homes are constructed, mostly up here, honestly as well, really well to withstand heat and fire from the outside. Got a good roof on the home. We've got some space cleared around the home, but then we leave the pine nettles and the duff in those areas that are kind of hard to reach to get to, where we put all those fine fuels with all of our combustible building materials. And if your deck or your staircase is on fire, that usually does not bode very well for the home. We come back post-fire and all of our trees are standing and all of our homes are down on the ground. And so that's where we really have to, as a homeowner, we can start on that first 3 to 5 feet around your home. Where are the weeds at? Where are the pine cones at? When we get a small fire on your property, where is it going to go? And you can pretty well walk around if it's dry grass, if it's pine cones and needles, and is it leading up to something that's combustible on the side of your home? That's a high hazard area. As you move out farther away, those trees that are out at 60 and 70 and 80 feet that have some density, that's what we prioritize, from our high hazard to our low hazard. But we want to start on that first 0 to 3 feet and then out to that first 30 feet. And our insurance companies are going to always be pushing us out to 200 feet. But again, that's not the same consistent haircut from 0 feet to 200 feet by any means. But how that vegetation interlays really is important. 200 is a new number. That's a big number. Lots of folks don't have 200 feet, sometimes off of one direction of their property line. And that doesn't mean that we're going to be out there with a pasture mower every year mowing at 200 feet. But it does mean if your house sits on some slope, your insurance company is going to factor in to 200 feet. And so we want to make sure that if we've got big trees that are downslope, you may think you have good spacing, but when we think of defensible space around your home, it's a circle. When it's on a slope, it's more of an egg shape. And we really need to take into account that slope and vegetation. Decks and fences, if it's attached and it's wooden, again, all that shingle and great siding and all those other things on your home features, really, all that tree work you did, all the limbing and pruning and tree work that you had done, if we just let it really get going right inside of the home, it's always a big issue for us. This is about an insurance agent here on the Front Range. This is one of the little back porch area in our house. The problem with some of these covered areas is we get a lot of heat and gas in a fire event. And so even without the fire being in that area, it's real warm, it's real dry, it's real hot, and it has real good ignition potential. And that there is shake shingle. And so what we did is we tore all that off and put steel in. She kind of liked the look. She said it was very feng shui. She still loves the patio area. And that was a real expensive addition to the house that made it really nice. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Again, a really nice low-cost option for us to take some of that super flammable stuff off the outside of our house. Zone 1, 0 to 30 feet. 0 to 30 is super important. I cannot stress enough, 0 to 5. It's one thing that I think kind of gets overlooked in a lot of these presentations and a lot of the insurance company information. And if it is a fine fuel leading up to something combustible on your home, we need to do something about that. And again, those are the maintenance issues. We certainly love doing that kind of work for folks, but oftentimes it's just a matter of people seeing that and getting an understanding. You got to put a shovel on it or put a pick on it, or how do we landscape it in a way that we know we're always going to be dealing with some of that stuff that just makes sense so it doesn't become a maintenance nightmare for you. We try to stay away from a lot of the small gravel because it's hard to get pine needles and duff out So trying to come up with ways that still keep the home looking nice, but that we really are being mindful of those ignition zones. And you got to start at ground zero. Working out to 100 feet, 30 to 100 feet, really depends on the property. That one that we looked at with all the trees and shrubs around the home, as you get out past about 50 feet, it opens up pretty well. So every property is different, but those are the numbers that are being given to us.
What they do is they encourage a mixture of deciduous and coniferous trees to help with that.
High hazard areas out as they're 100 to 200 feet. Most properties, that's going to be a limited amount of maintenance out there. When we get out into those areas, we think more of overall forest health as well. The thinning going on in those areas is largely, we can focus on improving your overall tree health. If we've got too much of one thing and not enough of another, if it's low branches, really looking for the continuity. We don't generally have to thin 200 feet down below the home, but we need to break up, that density as it comes up slope. These are some areas that were also really high hazard areas. In this picture here, initially we had large pine trees here and over here and another one here. And we have had to cut all of that back because of fire. We also cut a bunch out along the road because of pine beetle. And these are some of the things that we've put back in. And I think when we think about Firewise Landscaping, we want to be able to help, whether you're just trying to get a couple of spruce trees going out to give you some privacy at 30 or 40 feet off the house, or whether you're really trying to figure out how do you make the area around your home less flammable, but we still want it to look nice. We still want to landscape it. We don't want to put a bunch of water on it. We don't want to do things that don't look natural in the area, but we can still make them look nice and really get that fire rating down. So, and this is some before and after here. A lot of these shrubs, as you know, the voles kind of got to these buggers as well. But that was one, the home sold, wouldn't renew the homeowner's insurance. The bank would not sign the loan without the homeowner's insurance certificate being able to move forward. And so we ripped a lot of that out, and this is what went in its place. And there's a bunch of the different ground covers that we have listed back there and some handouts for you. And then just more sparse in here. We've got some pretty penstemons in here, and again, this is all first year planting, and so everything you see in the ground here will end up being a really nice color, low ground cover, but they're all within that first 5 to 10 feet of the house, and so we want to be real mindful of the density and the height of those plants as well. Again, just some more. This is a fire. We've done a few of these up in the neighborhood here as well. Now, another homeowner who just did not want to deal with the tall weeds and the vegetation. We had done some other granite work for him similar to that, and so he went with that's a 3 to 5 inch, real easy to get a big blower in. It was also getting a little bit of erosion issue off a few corners of the house. That's basically a maintenance-free area. We put fabric down in there. This is a little smaller one here. Folks like to use that round cobblestone. Every few years, if you really look at it, if you haven't pulled that stuff out and pulled the weeds out, you'll end up finding those rocks are just sitting in a whole bunch of kind of things you'd start a campfire with. Lots of fine fuels and pine needles and stuff, and you just roll them back and we clean them out, get back down to dirt, and then put the dirt back in. And so they're all, lots of times folks aren't interested in flowers and pretty rocks, but they want something that's going to be functional. And so trying to find something there, and we're always thinking about how do we maintain that, over time.
So we've talked a lot about what you can do to mitigate fire hazards on your own property, and we've talked about the home ignition zone extending up to 200 feet. However, what if your neighbor has hazards on his or her property that could cause fire brands or other risks to your home? Worse yet, what if your neighbor's property is within your home ignition zone? So in addition to preparing your home and family for potential wildfires, consider working with your neighbors to prepare your entire neighborhood. Talk to one another, encourage them to become involved. We did a May 7th Wildland Fire Preparedness Day this year, and even though we had terrible weather, we had an amazing turnout. We also had our neighboring fire departments that we have mutual agreements with that will help one another out. And believe me, this last fire that we were at Starwood, 8 agencies were involved and 5 federal agencies. It was huge. Everyone was there to help and to support. So what we do for you on this end as a fire department, you could help us by doing your end and telling your neighbors to do the same.
And one thing I want to add just on the Firewise community, again, communities like Glacier View have been very active both through fire activity and through all the forest management and the great partnerships with folks like Tony Simons from Larimer County. But when the fire comes, as you know, we all have to go, and we have very limited resources. And so the whole focus of the Firewise community is not to just look at the vegetation and the plants, but to come out and look at the home. How do those soffits look? Do we have wood overhang? Are those things covered? Those are the types of things the insurance companies are starting to come on board with. They are using those recommendations, but it's really about your home ignition potential, starting kind of at ground zero and then working out. And again, I think it's really beneficial that is overlying with our insurance and all the things that we're trying to get done as a community as well. So they really do work hand in hand. And we find that when we do it right, we don't really have to, that was where a lot of the FIREWISE Landscaping comes in, is we start to cut all that stuff back, and then folks like, okay, well, now what? It's just bare over there and there's nothing in there. So there's lots of different solutions for that, but we want to make sure that even if you're not dealing with those insurance issues now, that we're putting things in that are drought tolerant, that the animals are going to stay off of, that at some point in the next couple of years when we're out there with your insurance letter, we're able to like I said, already be in a good path for that.
So what Tony and I were discussing was seeing how we can help the community together by creating maybe some activities. And these are just some ideas that maybe you might want. I'm just planting the seed for maybe next year. Maybe we do a chipping day for the residents, and I'll have you sign up, and Tony and I will go through the list of who's signing up, and you can bring out your slash, and that day, and we'll do a pine needle or debris removal day. And
our chipper is slightly larger than that. We actually have two of them, so we figure we've doubled the horsepower in the last couple of years.
So keep it in mind in the future. What we'd like to do is to maybe be on the lookout for the next door or something. We're going to plan something like that for next year, so we can try to get the community involved. As it is, we appreciate you being here listening to us, so we're counting on you to spread that word too. We've also got, we'll conduct FIREWISE landscaping construction information sessions. Tony's here. He's got that sign-up sheet going around. He'd be more than happy to come out, take a look at your property, give you some ideas, and how you can modify some of your property for FIREWISE.
These are some of the things that would go in as Glacier View has kind of crossed the hurdle on that stuff for the FIREWISE certification. There aren't a lot of those communities around. That's a pretty big deal. That's not something where you just send in $100 and some pictures from the work of the fire department. There's a lot of work that a lot of folks have done up here in the community for a lot of years. And again, I just can't stress enough. Those are the things when we talk about grant programs and funding opportunities are really a nice bar. And we're trying to let your insurance company know that not only have you done the work on your home, that we can't get to 200 feet on the west side of your property, but that you live in a FIREWISE community, and these are the other things that have been done. Those are the type of things that just really, they help everybody in the community.
And that's what's nice about the community. We all want to be there, get involved, and help. And even the Glacier Gals, they provide the reflectors for your street numbers. Those are so important for us as firefighters. When we go out on a call in the pitch black and we can't see, those number reflectors show up, and I tell you, it's not always the fire that gets us there. There's other emergencies too that get us out there on the road. Any discussions? Oh, that was it?
We want to make sure that the vegetation and the footprint around your propane tank, really, that there's just no potential for fire to creep up under your propane tank. They have a tremendous fire rating on them. If that tank was replaced somewhere down the road for some reason, if it wasn't a monumental task to bump it out a little bit far, but we see people putting in cinder block walls and just doing crazy things where it's so rarely the propane tank for us. Now, having said that, if it's tucked in among the trees and the shrubs and all the pine needles, that's going to be an issue. But I think keep it clear. You want to keep fire off of that, just like your deck and your step landings. I think if you're having one put in, ideally, a good 30-foot spacing. We use the same rule with firewood. A good 30 feet, not down slope, would be ideal. But we've never had a policy canceled yet where the propane was at 28 feet or 25 feet off the house. We may have had to mitigate a few things to make the footprint around a little bit bigger, but it's usually pretty workable. And people just go crazy with their pine needle raking. You do not need to rake every pine needle off your property. You need that first 5 feet around your home. If you've got heavy accumulation under your trees that are close to your home in that first 30 to 50 feet, getting those cleared out. The trees like that anyway, less acidic. But again, if you rake them all up, you got to do something with them. So be mindful. They do need to be raked in some areas, but we show up for chipping days and we see 40 bags of pine needles and we're like, we can put them through the chipper if you'd like, but we're probably better hauling them off or trying to recycle them in the forest. Fine fuels on the ground, yeah, it's everything is game. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.